Hi everyone, I'm recording today a little bit about the Peekaboo art journal page that I'm going to share with you. I'm also going to give you a couple of variations so that you can see the same technique but just use it in different ways to produce different art journal pages, I guess, at the end of the day. So I've already done the page that we're talking about in a black journal. I think this is the Dilutions journal, but it's the 8.5 by 8.5. The page that we are going to be making today was this one. This was the Peekaboo art journal page. Now, this is a Natalie May collage paper sheet that I've done absolutely nothing to except for gel medium it on to the bottom to the page. I did put some clear gesso on first because these were black pages that I was working on. So I put some clear gesso down first so that when I stick the collage paper on top, the black of the paper doesn't come through and take away from a lot of the design. The only other thing that I did was I used the Dusty Attic stencil and I went across the edges of the page with a little bit of paint and stenciled some of that brown down, and that was it. And that was purely because I wanted something on the page so that when this opens and shuts, it's got something to go with on this side or against. But whatever you put on this side is entirely up to you. You don't have to do this collaging business. You can go ahead and just throw a whole heap of paint down at it, or just stick down whatever it is that you've got, a whole heap of ephemera, or just paint rainbow colors in the background so that when your Peekaboo page is sitting down or your cutout lace page is sitting down, it's got something in the background that will help pop against the base color that you've used. So one of the things to think about is, what is the pattern that you want to use for or as a template? Okay, so this was a stamped butterfly image, and all I did was stamp it on a piece of regular cardstock and then I fussy cut that out. But if you don't want a butterfly image, there's a whole heap of other things that I need you to do. Start looking through your stash for what you've got. So, shapes that you might already have. If you've got star-shaped dies, you don't even have to cut a die shape out. You can actually use the die itself to trace your template. If you like hexagons, you can go ahead and you can again just use the die and the size of the die that you want to do this exercise. Circles, if you want to use circles, that's fantastic as well. Other things that you could do is look through maybe your stash of stamps. So again, like I said, if you want to use hexagons, look through your stash of stamps. See what you've got that has got some basic shapes that you're not looking at the inside of it, you're kind of looking at the outside. So these are 1 1/4 inch hexes. So even if you stamped one of those out and just cut the outside out, like I said, if you didn't have a die, you could do that and you could use that as your basic shape. If you do like the butterfly idea or the moth idea, again, you're just looking at the outside basic shapes, you would stamp that and cut that out. If you want it to look like, maybe a person dancing, this one would be a great one to use because it's got arms that are sticking out. So, you may be able to stamp that and then cut that out and then join up where the arms go. This would be another one because you've got quite broad sections here, and you could go side by side and have little spaces in the middle. It just depends on how big the spaces are that you want around it. Again, think of stencils that you may have as well. They could be stencils that you've got that are almost like maybe radiating sun rays, because that would give you perfect sections in the middle that you could already cut out. So whatever shape it is that you're using, think of punches that you've got. You just think outside the box. Maybe I'll just use a piece of paper for now and work on that to give you an idea of what it is that we're talking about. Okay, so what I'm probably going to do for this is I'm probably going to use a couple of basic circle shapes for this. I'm going to have a look because I want to pick a size that means I can get a few on my page without it looking too crazy. So one of the first things that you're going to do is you're going to get yourself a ruler. Look, I don't have a pencil, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to use a pen for this exercise. Okay, if this was your black journal that you were doing it in, you don't have to gesso it or do anything to it. You can just go straight onto it. If you're doing it on a white piece of paper and you think that you're going to want, so for example, if I bring this back in so you can have a look at it, if you think that you're going to want to leave it white and then do some of this stuff in a different colored ink, that's fine too. Or if you want to go ahead and you want to paint some of your cardstock first, and then we'll go ahead and we cut things out, you can do that too. I just like the idea of the contrast because we're going to make some of these borders out of some colourful pattern paper. I'd like to keep the base quite plain. So, you know, black with white printing on it is actually really effective. So if anything, if I was going to go ahead and do something on this piece of paper, I'd probably go ahead and paint it black, if anything. But for now, I'm not going to. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to decide how big I want my borders to be. Okay, so at this point in time, I'm thinking possibly maybe 3/4 of an inch. So, yep, I've got a pen. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that around. And I'm going to draw a border from the edge of the page in about 3/4 of an inch all the way along. And this just gives me somewhere to work to and against. It sets my parameters, okay? Make sure I've got that right. So now I know whatever it is that I'm doing in the middle here, and I'm doing it, and I won't go past that into any of these areas there. So taking the shape that you've got, you know, whether it's the butterfly, depending again on how big the journal is that you're working on, take your circle, like I said, whatever it is that you're working on. And what I want to do is every time I go ahead and draw this pattern, I want to make sure that I'm bridging it. So a bridge basically means that you're connecting one area to another area. And that's what I'm doing with this technique. I'm making sure that I bridge. So I need my circle to touch here and here. So it's up to you. It's easier obviously to use the outside of a die if you're using the outside of the die. So slightly overlap so that it goes a little bit into your bridge, into this area here, and a little bit into that area there. So what I would do is I'd go ahead and draw that there. Okay. Now, not the most fantastic circle. And remember, because you're going to be fussy cutting this out by hand, you might want to pick a couple of easier shapes to cut out than perfect circles. But even if mine don't turn out so perfect, I'm not so fussed about it. Again, here and here, I need them to bridge, so I need them to touch. So what I would do is I'd go ahead and do that circle again. Not a fantastic circle. Again, I'm using a pen, not a pencil, which, you know, not so great. So now what I'm going to do is I've come to the end here, and that's okay as well. So again, bridging here, and coming to here. So, sorry, it seems to be flipping around a lot. So with my circle, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you can see what would happen is I am going to keep these areas, and I'm going to cut out these areas here. So to make things a little bit more interesting, I'm going to go ahead and put my circle, the next circle, down here, bridging it, this one, okay? So go ahead and go like that, all the way around. So that means that I would be cutting out that area there. Now when I'm doing this one, I have to bridge here, here, and here. Okay, so slightly join or overlap as you go around. Okay, and then the same here. You want to bridge those two areas, so you draw something like that and bring it down there. That means you're cutting out this area, this area, this area, and go ahead and do that again. So you're just going to continue on with this until you fill out the page. And as you go, if it makes more sense for you to fill this in so that you can see what it is that you're doing, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm just going to keep drawing my circles here. So now that I've done this, I can actually see that when I am going to cut this out, there is going to be very few spaces because I've used and filled quite a lot of full shapes here. There's going to be very few small places for me to cut out compared to if you use the shape like a butterfly that you then repeat, because you know, you've got some areas here that are quite large, which is what helps you to see behind it, whereas on the sheet and the shape that I've picked here, the shapes are more prominent and the cutouts are not as much. So I guess at the end of the day, that is a choice for you, what it is that you want. Hexagons would probably work better maybe than circles, because you'd have some quite definitive shapes when they join together, you know. You'd have almost some triangles or some diamond shapes to cut out, depending on how you put that through for yourself. But basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my cutting knife out, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut out all these things, these little shapes. Okay, here we go. If I'm not exact, I am not going to stress about this, because this is meant to be something relaxing for me. This isn't something meant to be where I have to overthink anything. So I am quite okay if I don't have some perfect circles, or I don't have some perfect lines here. If they're a little bit squiggly, it doesn't matter. I also find that to help your hands and your arms, when you're cutting, it's always easier. Have a really good surface to cut on, but pull against you. This is a Fiskars craft knife, and I actually find it a little bit easier to use than the other ones because my hands are getting more sore as I get older. So I'm able to hold this in a couple of different ways to help the soreness of my hands. But whatever tool you have that you prefer using, go ahead and use it. But the technique is it's always easier to cut pulling towards you, and it does make life easier if you have a sharp blade that you are using when you cut. Okay, so as I've done this, you can see there are a few bits, and the circles are taking up a lot of the space. So again, it depends on what you're trying to look at on the other side. Do you want things to be more visible? Like, for example, if that was a collage of a lady and I wanted the lady's face to be more visible, you can see by having this over the top, you really can't see a lot of what's underneath, just some colors. And again, if that's what you're going for, that's fine. But if you have something underneath, or you have something in mind to put underneath that you'd like to have a little bit more visible, a couple of things that you could do are, again, it depends on whether you're doing this on a piece of paper that you're going to put into an art journal later, okay, which you absolutely could, because there is still time for me to go ahead and tape that into a journal before we go ahead and put these borders on top. Okay, so there's lots of options for you, and I'm not saying it to confuse you anymore. I'm just saying you just need to think about the world's your oyster, really. At the end of the day, you don't have to be stuck with something just because you don't like it. Think about what you could use to fix it up or to change it up. Okay, I'm trying to have a look at the set that I've got to see if there was a smaller circle in it, but I don't think I have one. I don't have a punch that can go in and punch that, but if you were happy to do some more cutting, another option for you, if you had done circles, was if you had a compass. And I mean, this is obviously if you want to keep your circles absolutely perfect. If you didn't have a compass, you know, and you've got one of these like bead tools, circle tools, you can use that. If you haven't, and you've got, no, I don't know, I'm trying to think, or a mathomat. So, excuse me, this is, as you can see, this is something that I've had since year 12, okay, year 11 and 12 maths. In fact, I think I got it in year 10. Let's not talk about how many years ago that actually was, but it still serves a really good purpose. So, another thing to think about, okay, if you think that is too full and you want to cut it back a little bit more, pick a circle that's smaller than the one that you've just drawn. Okay, and what you may be able to do is to go into the middle and draw a circle smaller in the middle of the circle that you've already drawn. Okay, if you're coming to the edges, make sure you are still bridging so that there's still some part of the edge of the circle that sits there and joins, connects your whole piece to the edge of the page. Because if once you break that, pretty much the whole of your inside's just going to fall out. And that's the last thing you want, right? Nobody wants insides hanging out. Not after you've worked so hard on this anyway. Now, I understand that some people would be intimidated by fussy cutting out some of these inner circles, but there are some easy ways to do that as well. And once I finish drawing all these circles, I'll show you what I mean. So for, where is it? That one I think I was using, wasn't I? Lost it then. There. There. And possibly one there. Now what's going to happen is some of this is going to be very flimsy. So again, here's, if you're not a cutter, or you're worried about perfect circles, or you're not worried about perfect circles, pull towards you. Okay, so obviously you can have a go. Make sure that you are really well supporting here, and just turn your paper with your knife as you're going around. Now what I've done here is I've made this peekaboo section very small, so there probably won't need to be a lot of decorating that I go ahead and do on top of this. But if this is not something that you think that you could do and you want to use a pair of scissors, an easy way to do that is to cut from one side of the circle to that first, okay? And then what you can do is you can get in there with a sharp pair of fine nosed scissors, which I have here somewhere. Okay, and then once you've actually cut that square, it can give you a little bit more control. So you've got room to get your scissors in there. Your hands won't hurt as much. Okay, and you can go ahead and you can cut out those shapes. Please don't feel like you have to do circles just because I'm demonstrating circles. Like I said, keep it easy for yourself and whatever it is that you want to do. Okay. Okay, so we have almost come to the end of all our cutout parts, and this is where I guess you have to decide what you want to do with these sections. So like I said, because we're making the borders a little bit colourful, and usually what's behind this screen or this lace cutout page is quite colourful, I do recommend that you keep this a single colour, so either a white or a black or just like a monochrome colour, because then what you're going to do on top of that, you're going to do a little bit of stamping so that you can just put a little bit more texture onto your page. So what we're going to do now, or what I'm going to do now, and again this depends on whether you've got black, sorry, you can see a lot of cat hair that's now stuck to my silicone mat. Anyway, regardless, I'm just going to use a brush and a little bit of black gesso. If you already have a black page, then you don't really have to do anything to this section to prep it any more than what it already is. I am not worried about prepping this border because I am going to cover it. So there's really no point me painting it and wasting any paint. You can use black paint, you can use black gesso, whatever it is that you want to use. It really doesn't matter. It's just got to be a single colour. Okay, so I don't see. Now again, with what I'm going to do on top of this, I'm going to now emboss or stamp and emboss over the top in white. So what you could have done if you had a white bit of paper is you could have done some reverse resist if you wanted to. It just depends on your paint, what paint it is that you're using. But for me, I want to see what I'm doing as I go, and I don't want to make things harder than they need to be. And because this is going to be a peekaboo page, I recommend that you turn over and you do that side of it as well, because while you've got your paints out, it's just as easy to get it sorted at the same time. So go ahead and paint your edges black. Just need a tiny little there, so just check that you haven't got any white still showing anywhere. Yep, that's pretty much it on both sides. And then you can give that a dry with your heat gun. Okay, so for your next step, there's a couple of things that you could do for this. You could use some Versamark ink and some white embossing powder. It doesn't matter, super fine, chunky, whatever it is that you've got. We're just giving a little bit of dimension there. Or what you could do is you could, if you had a white ink pad and some clear embossing powder, you could use that too. You're looking for some stamps that will be very easy for you to use to cover surfaces for this. So you could use, you know, a background script stamp if you had it. In the original, I had to use this stamp because I wanted a little bit of sort of like flower and a little bit of script things to show up on the page that we were working on. So I wanted, you know, you can see here that I had used a little bit of that flower and bit there, and then some of that coming over, but there was a different stamp that I used on that side, and then just went around with the script stamp for some of this. And I did this on both sides of my page, and then only embossed a little bit of it, but it's up to you if you emboss the whole thing or you just emboss a little bit. Okay, so this is our next step in the journal. This is what we're up to. We're going to do some stamping and we're going to do some embossing. So because I want to change it up to what I did a little bit before, I'm going to use some of these numbery stamps. I think that's an All in Create one, and I think this was a generic jobby that came as a big sheet, and I just cut them down so that I can make them into some smaller background stamps for me. So this is what I'm going to do right now. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. So make sure that your Versamark ink pad is nice and juicy. And go ahead and just put that down. Now you'll be able to tell where you have stamped and where you haven't. When you lift up your piece, it usually shows, you can see a little bit of a shine or a little bit of a sheen depending on you know. And when I do this, I don't usually go ahead and I'm just going to kind of line it up, and if a little bit of it overlaps, no big deal for me. Okay, so I can see that I've got half the page pretty much there. There's a certain section in the corner that doesn't really have a lot, so I might just fill that up a little bit. Just check it out, see that you've got, and I'm going to do this I think half a page at a time, because otherwise you're probably going to find yourself with some ink that's drying up, and you really don't want that if you can possibly help it. You want to get the best results. So now, I mean, this is some Lawn Fawn textured white, so it's going to be a lot thicker than your usual white, I'd say. Okay, lift up, just give it a little tap to get rid of some of my excess, and you can see there that I've actually got a fairly good coverage with. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue to fill in that space, and then I'm going to continue to fill in that space, and you don't need to sit here and watch me do all that, so I will come back when that has been completed. Collection of paper, but I want you to start thinking about this exercise in terms of what it is that you can use that you've already got, possibly paper that's in your scrapbooking or card making stash that you've not used in a long time, that you maybe don't know what to do with, you don't like. This is a great way to use up those things. So here's a bit of paper that's got some beautiful patterns already made on it, so you wouldn't really have to do a lot to this to get it to be a border for yourself. Then this was a 12 by 12 piece of paper that you can cut through and make them into journaling cards or something, but I want you to put that theory aside as to what it was made for, and just think along the lines of, oh, I've got some blue that transitions into some pink and transitions into some yellow, and I can make some of this into some patterns. Same with here, I've got some greens that can transition into some white with some additional patterns that are already here that I could use up for my borders as well. Another type of paper, if you've got paper that has got lots of beautiful gradients in it, that's a great paper to use as well for this exercise. If all else fails, just get your stamps out and just stamp a whole stack of things out, and then go, okay, I don't really like any of that, and I'm going to cut a lot of it up. So some of the other things that you're going to need for this part of your exercise is you're going to need either some gel pens or some finer Posca pens, paint pens. And if you're going to do this in reverse, these are black, obviously. This is, I think, a Jane Davenport inky quill. It's a really pretty brush stroke pen, which I like to use a lot. But if you're going to do this in reverse and you've got darker colours and you want your pattern to stand out on top of it, you can use a selection of white gel pens, white paint pens, and that kind of stuff as well. Besides this, I want you to go through your stamp stash. Don't tell me you have no stamps. I'm sure you guys have some stamps. So, you know, these are some of the uniquely creative stamps. They're minis, circles that have got some patterns on them. Look for things, you know, small numbers, small patterns. I think these were some uniquely creative ones that had some patterns as well. You've seen me use this guy already for our main page, but again, it's got some patterns on it that I'm happy to use. There's some triangles on this one. There's a couple of flourishes for this, a couple of dots. If you've got small flowers, I'm not usually a big flower person, but if you've got some flowers, you know, small flowers, big flowers, I think this was, you know, that's already got some border stamps on it, which is great to use. A couple of flowers in there. And you're also going to need some masking paper. So, you know, post-it notes are really, really great for this. I've used post-it notes before, but I think from Officeworks I ended up getting a couple of these magnetic notes. They're great because they're not sticky, but they like they've got no actual sticky bits on it, but because of the static, they stick to whatever it is that you're going to use. So to prep you off for this exercise, you can do a couple of things. First of all, have a practice on bits of paper that you really don't like. Now, what we're doing here is we're trying to make a border that's going to cover this section only. So it won't be too wide. So you're going to need to practice some of your drawing skills in terms of nothing too wide that's going to take over the page. So I'd say here, you know, that's probably possibly an inch the most in their little swirls that they're doing. But on our page, depending on how big you've cut your border, you'd have a look, and for me, I'd say probably 3/4 of an inch to an inch is the most that I'd need to make my paper with when I'm doing it. So with my trimmer, I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually just going to pre-trim a couple of strips that are 1 inch wide, because that gives me a guide. I can't go over that. I can't make my swirls bigger than that. So I have to make them fit inside that piece of paper. Okay. So, you know, I might do a couple here of different ones because like I said, I'm going to go through this exercise with you and give you a couple of different options that you can use to make your borders. So here, this guy, it's actually really funky paper. I quite like it. Nice, and it's not that thick. I don't even know where it was from in all honesty, so it'd be great to use as collage paper when the time comes if I was doing something with collage on it. Oh, that's a bit funky as well. Okay, I'll cut a couple of strips of this because I like the fact that it's going through the ombre motions, so we'll do a bit of that. Now, even though I'm showing you this and I'm showing you this on various pieces of paper, something to keep in mind is that when you start working on your page and you want your page to be very cohesive, so tie together and look the same, you're going to need to cut yourself 4 to 8 strips of the same type of paper. Okay, so at the end of the day, depending on whether you want to do some borders colourful on this side, that's great, and then if you want to do some different colours on this side to tie in with whatever you've got going on here, that's up to you, but you just need to make sure that you've got enough strips so that when you're making these borders, you've got that ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to put all these extra bits aside and I'm going to start you off on your, now you're going to need a stamping block of some sort for this as well, and a couple, obviously if I've said stamps, you're going to need some inks as well. Make sure your ink pads are nice and juicy for this exercise. So the first simple one that I said I was going to start with is one that pattern paper is already there, it's already made for you. So you know, the easiest way to start is to turn your pattern paper long ways. I'm going to move this silicone mat out from behind me. to start with. And again, it's up to you whether you use a gel pen or a marker. You know, you pick. It's the world's your oyster at the end of the day. So I like starting with a line with my ruler. Okay, and that's fine. So what you can do now is I want to go ahead and I want to do a couple of these mountains and hills, but I want to do them a couple of different sizes. So here I could go like that, and then a couple small. Ideally though, when you're doing them, try and bring the sides up together, so then that way when you're cutting you don't have this massive V and a small bridge. Okay, so have a little bit of a go at this, and if you feel like you need to do some practicing, look, this is just an exercise in fun, so don't overthink this or anything like that. And then when you're coming back on your paper, do some scribbles, okay, with your lines so it kind of looks arty-farty. And then in some areas where your lines have come through together, you could maybe do some crosses in some certain areas, so it just gives you a bit more interest. Okay, if you don't want to do crosses and you want to leave it, that's fine too. In some of these areas you might want to define that hill. So by going ahead and looking at some of these and you go, oh, I might want to do an insert in that. I like that area, or there's not really a lot in there, but I might want to do that. So go ahead and give yourself some definition in some of these. A couple where that might go like that. And if you don't like an outline that you've done, maybe go ahead and fix it by doing an inline. Okay, so do that a couple of times. Like obviously there's a big one here, you don't have to worry about too much of that. I want that to look a little bit bigger so it's not the same size. I want that to go a bit like that, and coming down. Okay, so now that you've done that, you can also then go ahead and grab, you know, just look at some of the colors that you've actually got there and think to yourself, oh, okay, I want to enhance some of the stuff that I've got already. I've just got some literally cheapo kids Crayola markers here, okay? And I'm going to go, oh, okay, there's a really pretty blue or turquoisey color that goes through. And of course, now that I want a turquoisey color, I don't have a turquoisey color. But what else have I got that kind of ties in? There's a bit of a pink and a mauve. So maybe I'll take the pink from here and I'll fill that section in a little bit darker. That's a bit darker. So I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to fill that section in a bit dark. I like that bit there. So to pull some of that into there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the marker in there. What else have I got? I've got the oranges. I do have a little bit of orange coming through here, so maybe I'll put an orange there. Or that orange comes through, so I'll go there. Maybe I'll pull a little bit of this orange into here. And a bit of orange in there. And then what else have I got in here? I don't really have too much of a selection here, do I? There's no green, so I don't really want to introduce a new color if I can help it. And also another thing to consider is make sure that your black, like you've actually had to go and you dried some of this black that you've put down before you start coloring in, because the last thing you want is to do some smudges like what I've done here. Okay, so we want to try and make sure. Now if there are some areas where they're a bit blank and there's not a lot of anything, we'll go ahead with your marker and add, like you've already got beautiful dots and things here, right? So go ahead and just add some more. Go, okay, in there I might want some dark blue. Okay, I'll put a bit of color in there, and then a bit more in there, some swirls. What else goes with? I'm going to get that purple again and go, okay, maybe I want some more purple dots in here. Okay, and then when you finish, give that a little bit of a dry. Grab your scissors and Yeah, you're going, oh Deb, you're gonna make me fussy cut. Okay, but this isn't fussy cutting, people. All right, don't get too caught up on this at the end of the day. This is meant to be a fun exercise for you. And you can see here, sometimes I'm sticking to the lines that I've drawn, and sometimes I'm just going a little bit off the edge, and that's okay as well. Okay. Do some cutting, and if you want to, and you want to, you know, go ahead and just get rid of some of these edges fast, so then you can come back in with your scissors. And I like using scissors like this so that I can keep a hold and a little bit of control of when you are fussy cutting, but you use whatever scissors that you're comfortable with for this exercise. Okay. Right. And if there are things you don't like, off with their heads. Yeah, look, yeah, you pick what appeals to you. At the end of the day, it is your project. It is no one else's. So the only person that you're doing this for is yourself, so that you can get whatever end result out of it that you want, that makes you happy. Okay? So, gone ahead. Oh my goodness, we've come to the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to trim off that edge there, because this is how I want it to look. So here you go, you've got something that's really simple and easy to do, especially if you've got a stack of scrap paper in your bag, okay, or in your stash. So what you would then do is, this is going to then sit over the top, depending on how many of these you made for yourself, okay. This would sit and go around your page. So you would then put some glue down and you would glue this down, okay. So that is example 1 of how to make a quick border. Let's move on to example 2 on how to make another quick border. So, like I said, you've got some paper that you're moving things into. Again, you're always going to start with making your swells, your mountains and your hills. Okay, that's the first thing you're going to do. So this time I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to work with some Posca pens. I think this is a 3M bullet shaped, and this is a bullet shape but a 1mm 0.7. I like both. I use these a lot. Okay, so sometimes it's nicer, because if you want a better edge or a deeper edge, a thicker edge, okay, you can go ahead and do some of these. Try and keep them a consistent width, okay, so you haven't got some super fatties and some super skinnies. Try and keep them a consistent width. And then to the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to draw my line, and oh my goodness, I'm breaking all the rules. I didn't use a ruler, and I'm 100% okay with that, because I'm going to come back with my scribbly lines. And you guys are going to go, holy crap, Deb, this looks like a kindergarten kid did it. Totally okay with that. I'm going to put a couple of crosses in certain places. Okay. Go ahead and do some of those things if you want to. Right, like I did before. Or leave it. Entirely up to you. Okay. So now, using this same marker, a couple of things that you can do. Alright. Pick every couple, and you're going to go ahead. And like I said again, before you start, pick a couple and do that too, because it just gives it a little bit more interest. Don't have to do it to all of them if you don't want to, or if you want to do it to all of them, you go ahead and do it to all of them. Alright, it's your project and it's what's fun for you. Okay, and then go ahead and go, oh, okay, I'm going to fill some of these, maybe this one. I want some coming off the end of the page, some bigger And then I want a couple in here, and oh, they're not absolute circles. Shock horror. I'm okay with it. Funky little giraffe looking spots. Again, that's okay. Right, what's another thing that you can do? Okay, so for some of this, I'm now going to take my small or skinnier roller pen, okay, and maybe I want some of these to, oh, there's a nice line already there for me, so I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of these lines in for additional, okay. Nothing here, which is fine. So what can I do in here? I can probably go ahead and do a couple of crosses, okay. Let's continue with my theme, okay. So if I'm finding some lines of things here already, I can go ahead and I can make some of these things already. Maybe I'll make some stripes going this way. Ooh, look at me go, being a rebel. Some stripes going this way. Maybe I want some stripes going this way. And they don't have to be perfect at all, okay. What about if I do some crosses here? You can go ahead and do some little, what about some flowers? Okay, if you don't like the way you draw flowers, then don't draw flowers, okay. Pick something else to do, whatever it is that works for you at the end of the day. I want some biggie circles. Maybe I want to put some biggie circles in the middle of those. Yeah, why not? I want a couple of biggie circles in the middle of those. All right, so what you've just gone ahead and done is you filled up some of these with some doodles, really, and gone ahead and put some color in. So again, if you want to, you don't have to, but you know, you could go ahead and add some additional color, taking some over the top if you want to. And look, you stop when you're feeling ready to stop, okay. And then again, you would go ahead and you would cut this out, and then that would be your another sort of border that you can go ahead with and pop on there. And look, they don't have to be hills and mountains. If you want them to be circles, you can go ahead and you can make them circles, okay. If you want to make them rectangles, you know, various shaped rectangles, go ahead. Triangles would be a fantastic thing to use as well, okay. So that's example number 2 of you just using, you know, paper. And I know it's hard because I haven't cut all this excess off, right? So some of you are still focusing on the fact that there is excess at the back to take away from the pattern that we've just drawn. And this is where the thicker bullet pen, you know, it comes in handy because you still have a nice solid outline. Obviously it depends on how well you fussy cut, whether you're in kindergarten like me still and you can't really remember to stay in or out of the line, and you go ahead and you keep cutting things that you're probably not meant to cut, but who knows, because this is my project and it's from my head, and really nobody knows what the end result has to look like. Ho hum, ho hum. Nobody wants me to sing while I'm doing this, okay? I might make this go forward so that you don't have to sit there and watch me fussy cut this whole section out. And there you have it, okay. There's some more funky borders, so funky doodled borders, and they're right there. So you'd pop those onto your page like that, okay. or come in, pick the sections that you like. If you want a little bit of 2 colors, you go like that, cut your ends off, and you're going to stick that guy on. Okay, so that's another example of borders. Let's keep going with examples of how else you can make these little treats. So this is where, if you have stamps, like I said, you should have gotten out a selection of your stamps. Okay, and the paper that I'm using, let's say I want to use some of this paper now for this particular exercise. Okay, as always, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by drawing my mountains and my hills. So, oh gosh, there's my non-straight scribbly lines. I like to do 2 or 3 sometimes, just to prove to myself that I'm crappy at drawing straight lines. Okay, and then go ahead and start bringing in my mountains and my hills. Now don't be stingy with this exercise. You're here to have a little bit of fun, okay? You can see I'm moving through. Now I'm going to just make sure that this paint pen is dry. Okay, this is where I have use of my masking paper. Gosh, words just evaded me then. And because I don't need huge amounts of them, huge amounts of this, I'm just going to cut this up into a couple of smaller pieces for myself, so I've got a little bit more control instead of stuffing around with larger pieces. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to mask off on either side of this guy. Now, you know what, in hindsight, it's probably easier to go ahead and stamp this stuff first, because you're not going to be able to sort of try and control yourself. But remember, we're cutting off our excess, so don't overthink it. I've gone ahead and I'm stamping that in there. Okay, now if I want this in a, gosh, I've lost my little masking tape. If I want this in a couple of other sections, I just go ahead, mask off where I don't want it to be, and go and stamp. I'll move that along, probably do another one in there, stamp up and stamp on there. Okay, that's one stamp. Let's get another pattern that we like and go ahead and mask off again, and use some of these little squares, these little I like that stamp. This one's actually a really cool one because it's got those in there as well. Again, so this is for those of you that hate the thought of drawing anything freehand. You freak out because you think, I hate the way my stuff looks all the time, it never looks right. Well, this is a great way to do some stuff. Okay, now the next one along that I'm going to do, and it doesn't have to stay in the same order. Remember, I've got some of these, so I'm going to go ahead and put some raindrops in there. That's starting to look really cool. Okay, and get my stamp again. What about if the raindrops went sideways? Okay, that's cool. Raindrops in there. Okay, because I've got 2 on this, you know what, I'm going to use the other stuff too. So, where else can I put some of this? Go ahead and go, yep, in there. I like it. And then maybe in there. So don't underestimate the power of a little stamp, okay? You know, and quite often you'll go, oh, I don't really like that, or don't really need that. It's not about liking or needing it. It's about what can you make it look like, thinking outside the box. You know, I will have an evening of play with doing this sometimes when I don't want to make anything, and then I've got a box of ready-made, I've got a box of ready-made borders. So anytime that I want to go ahead and I want to do something now, because this is looking pretty organic, kind of probably don't really want to introduce some numbers, or do I want to introduce some numbers? Maybe I could introduce some text, but no, wait, there's still a couple of really funky looking ones here that I've not used, so I might just go with the flow and continue on, kind of like the center of this actually. So put that one there, move it along until I get to there. Have I left anything out? And then what about if I just want some dots? Some plain old dots. Do you want to break it up though? Yeah, let's break it up. Let's see if we can get some triangle action happening in here. I don't know how much of this will actually fit inside the shape that we're masking off, but not bad. And there's another one there. So and before you know it, you just developed your own funky little border. And again, because we've used ink, before I go ahead and do any cutting, and make sure that's nice and dry. And I'm going to get this. Okay. And go ahead. Fussy cut this out, because you're removing all that overstamping and excess around your black pen. Always have a look through your stash, right? Maybe you've got some border stamps, and then you can redo the borders. If you're not happy with the way they look, but you like the patterns on the borders, well then do this to it. Go ahead and redesign till you're happy with your design. Whoa, came back, so really hope this is still recording and that my battery hasn't run out. But there you have it. Okay, how cool is that? Now you can absolutely 100% go online and look for border stamps like this, which take the guesswork out of everything, okay? And then you can go ahead and you can stamp that up in black and then color some of that stuff in. The world is your oyster, but if you don't have access to something like this, I've just shown you how you can 100% make your own using the tools that you already have. Okay, so don't feel like you always have to go out and buy everything just because you don't have it there, you know, something to make, and someone's shown you one way to make something. Think outside the box. Okay, so you can see here, you know, or on this sheet of paper, if that was going to go over the top, that would be my border. Okay, and because this white is going to go, that color actually blends in really nicely, or complements what I've got behind here really nicely. So I'd cut the edge, go ahead and glue that on, cut the edge, glue, depending on how many of these that I've sat there and I've just made. Okay, so I've just given you quite a few ideas on how to go ahead and make your peekaboo page, and I really hope that you go ahead and you make a few so that you you know, can use it as a highlight for other pages, and just have some fun.